My wife lied about her middle name. And why? I found out my wife lied about her middle name. And it wasn't just a small lie. It all started on a Sunday morning, the kind where the sunlight sneaks in lazily through our blinds and you'd think nothing disastrous could happen. I was looking for some old paperwork to file taxes, the kind of boring adult stuff that makes you question every life decision leading to this point. Somehow, in the chaos of receipts, insurance forms, and random envelopes from 3 years ago, I stumbled upon a document that froze me in place. It was her birth certificate. Now, I know what you're thinking. Why was I snooping? Honestly, I wasn't really snooping. I was just trying to find something. Maybe a copy of my own birth certificate. I always misplace mine. And there it was, innocently sitting under a stack of library receipts and grocery coupons. I unfolded it, thinking, well, that's weird. We never needed this before. And then my eyes hit the middle name. I blinked. Twice. Maybe 3 times. Her middle name on this document was not the middle name she had told me she had. Her entire life, as I knew it, had been prefaced with Jessica Marie. Last name. That's the name I fell in love with. That's the name I said I'd marry. That's the name I signed countless Valentine's cards, grocery store loyalty programs, and wedding invitations under. But here, in black and white, it read, Jessica Elaine. Last name. Elaine, not Marie. I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes, feeling my brain juggle disbelief, confusion, and a creeping sense of betrayal. At first, I thought it had to be a typo. Birth certificates get typos sometimes, right? Maybe someone at the hospital made a mistake or the paperwork got messed up in some clerical nightmare. I shoved the certificate aside and tried to dismiss it. It's nothing, I muttered under my breath. Just a typo, nothing to worry about. But the thing about a lie, even a tiny one, is that it's like a pebble tossed into a pond. The ripples don't stop. By lunchtime, I couldn't resist. I started casually asking questions. So, wait, your middle name is Marie, right? I asked like it was the most mundane thing in the world. She looked at me, eyebrow raised, flipping a pancake with the precision of a seasoned chef. Yeah. Why? Just curious, I muttered, shrugging. I avoided mentioning the birth certificate. She didn't need to know I'd just discovered the first thread of what might unravel everything. She smiled, that warm, disarming smile of hers that could make any suspicion feel silly. Jessica has always been charming, loving, slightly secretive, but never in a way that seemed dangerous. More like she had little quirks she liked to keep to herself. The kind of little mysteries that make you fall for someone even more. I should have known she was good at hiding things. Just curious, she repeated, her smile softening, and I felt that stupid guilt wash over me. Maybe you're overthinking this, I thought. Yeah, I was probably overthinking it. After all, it was just a middle name. People have nicknames, fake names, stage names. Hell, my college roommate once went by Zeke because he thought it sounded cooler. Surely this was nothing. But the more I tried to shake it off, the more the name Elaine stuck in my mind. Something about it sounded deliberate. Over the next few days, I found myself noticing little things. I don't know if any of you have ever had that feeling, that creeping suspicion that something small is hiding something huge. You start seeing patterns in things that probably aren't even there. Like the time she told me she had lunch with her friend Marie, and I realized I'd never heard about this Marie before. Or when she mentioned a middle school teacher named Elaine, and I remembered thinking, that's an odd name to bring up. I started keeping tabs in my head. Jessica Marie, Jessica Elaine, Marie, Elaine. My brain felt like it was running a complicated Excel spreadsheet just to figure out what was going on. One evening, while pretending to scroll through social media, I did what any mildly obsessed Redditor would do. I dug a little deeper. Old posts, tagged photos, yearbook scans, and then I found it. A post from 10 years ago, a simple picture of her holding a cake with her friends tagged, Happy Birthday, Jessica Elaine. I stared at the screen, mouth dry. Elaine. That's when the sinking feeling hit me. This wasn't a typo, it wasn't a quirky little mistake. She had been telling me Marie her entire adult life. She had lied. I didn't know what to do with it. Part of me wanted to confront her immediately, to yell, to demand answers. But another part of me, the part that loves her so damn much, wanted to wait, to understand why. Maybe there was a perfectly reasonable explanation. Maybe it was a childhood trauma. Maybe she had hated the name Marie for some reason. I tried to rationalize it. The next morning, I decided to be subtle. So, Elaine, that's your middle name too, right? I asked casually, pouring my coffee. She looked at me like I had just asked if the sun rises in the west. Elaine? Yeah, I saw it somewhere. Maybe a post, I don't know, I just remember seeing it. Her expression flickered just for a moment, a little pause, and then she smiled. Smooth as silk. Oh, that's a long story. You really want to hear it? My heart skipped a beat. Here it was, the conversation I had been tiptoeing around for days. I mean, yeah, if you're comfortable, I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She laughed lightly, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. It's nothing weird, I promise. Just some childhood stuff. I didn't like Marie, so I switched it when I got older. Elaine felt safer. And just like that, my mind tried to file the answer under a reasonable explanation. But something didn't sit right. Safe? That word echoed in my head, louder than it should. Safe from what? Safe from whom? I wanted to press, but I didn't. Not yet. I needed time. I needed to figure out if this was just a quirky little lie or the first piece of a much bigger puzzle. The days passed, and I found myself sneaking glances at old emails, birthday posts, and mutual friends' pictures online. Every time, I felt like I was peeling an onion, but instead of tears, I felt tension, confusion, suspicion. I couldn't stop thinking, why would she hide this? It was a small thing, a middle name, but the implications were massive. Something about this didn't add up. People don't lie about middle names for fun. There's always a reason. And I intended to find out what it was. By the end of the week, my curiosity had morphed into a quiet obsession. I wasn't a paranoid person. At least, I like to think I wasn't. But I had started noticing the smallest details. The way she hesitated before answering certain questions. The way she subtly redirected conversations when her childhood came up. The little flinches when I jokingly called her Marie. And then, one night, as I was scrolling through an old forum where she used to post book reviews under her name, I stumbled upon a comment she had left under the name Jessica Elaine, last name. Not a typo, not a nickname. Her full name, dated years before I even met her. The pit in my stomach deepened. This wasn't a harmless little childhood preference. This was a choice. And the choice meant she had been deliberately hiding a part of herself from me for reasons she hadn't shared. I tried to sleep that night. Really, I did. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw the name Elaine flashing in neon in my mind. Elaine, Elaine, Elaine. What else had she lied about? How many small, seemingly insignificant things were actually part of a bigger secret? By the next morning, I knew one thing for certain. I had to find out. And whatever the truth was, it was going to change everything. The deeper I dug, the more I realized I didn't know her at all. After discovering that her middle name wasn't Marie, I thought maybe I could just let it go. Maybe it was a harmless lie, a little quirk from her past. But anyone who's ever stumbled upon something like this knows curiosity doesn't sleep. Not when your brain starts whispering, there's more to this. You're missing something. So I started small. Very small. Like innocently curious spouse small. I checked some old school records online, just casual searches, nothing invasive, or so I told myself. Elementary school yearbooks, high school newsletters, and the occasional obscure online forum where people from her hometown sometimes posted old memories. I found inconsistencies. Some people referred to her as Jessica Marie. Others called her Jessica Elaine, and some, surprisingly, didn't even remember her middle name at all. I laughed nervously at first. Maybe it was just forgetfulness. But then I found comments from childhood friends, posts from distant relatives I didn't even know existed. One former classmate had written, Elaine was always so shy in class, but Marie came out at parties. That sentence stuck with me. Elaine was shy? Marie came out at parties? It was cryptic, like there were two versions of her living in parallel timelines. I tried to ask around subtly, talking to mutual friends as casually as I could. So wait, Jessica's middle name is Marie, right? I'd ask, innocently, over brunch or text. I think so, came the reply, often followed by, or maybe Elaine, I don't really remember. I couldn't tell if they were genuinely unsure or if they were used to her changing details to keep things private. I started noticing a pattern. When people got close to the truth, they'd instantly become vague, almost uncomfortable. And the more I asked, the more the tension in my own house thickened. Jessica noticed something was off. She's smart like that? She asked me if I was acting weird, if something was wrong. I brushed it off with, just tired babe, work stress. But little arguments started cropping up, tiny sparks that felt disproportionate. Why are you scrolling through old posts again? She asked one evening, narrowing her eyes. Oh, I was just checking something for nostalgia, I muttered, hiding the panic that made my stomach twist. She didn't press, but I could feel the defensive wall go up. That familiar shift, the one where you sense someone is about to guard their secrets like treasure. It wasn't just her middle name anymore. Every little detail of her childhood, the stories she told about her parents, the way she described her siblings, or lack thereof, started sounding off. One night, I found myself looking at her old social media accounts, the ones she had abandoned before we met. Facebook, Tumblr, a dusty MySpace page. Who even uses MySpace anymore? Old photos of her birthday parties, school events, summer trips, and sometimes her name appeared differently. Elaine, Marie, Jessica alone. The inconsistencies gnawed at me. Was it an identity thing? Trauma? Escaping something? My mind started constructing every scenario possible. Maybe her parents were abusive. Maybe she ran from something in her past. Maybe she had changed her identity to survive. I realized with a sinking feeling that this wasn't going to be a small rabbit hole. And then came the emails. I wasn't technically snooping. Well, maybe I was. But in a half-hearted, I'm just checking to see if she emailed me about dinner kind of way, I ended up scrolling through old emails she'd left on the shared laptop. I'm not proud of this, I know it's invasive, but curiosity has a funny way of making ethics blurry. That's when I found a folder labeled simply, Not Jessica Marie. My hands froze on the keyboard. Not Jessica Marie. I clicked it. It wasn't password protected. Smart. Or maybe she wanted to hide it in plain sight. Inside were documents, scanned IDs, letters, and old files. One email from a decade ago was addressed to her under the name Jessica Elaine, last name. Another file was titled, Backstory, Do Not Share. I stared at the screen, heart hammering. This wasn't a silly childhood quirk, this was a whole secret life. She had deliberately hidden it from everyone, me included, and judging by the meticulous way it was organized, this wasn't a one-time thing. She had thought about it, planned it, protected it. I felt a mix of fear and fascination. Part of me wanted to shut the laptop and pretend I never saw it. Part of me wanted to dive in and uncover every single detail. I chose the latter. As I scrolled through the files, hints of her past emerged. Childhood trauma, a distant family that wasn't exactly the loving, picture-perfect setup she described. Mentions of a town she left abruptly at 16, cryptic references to someone she called the Shadow. Every piece added another layer to the puzzle. I couldn't sleep for days. Every time she walked into the room, my eyes would flick to her, studying her, trying to catch a hint of the person behind the facade. She smiled, cooked, laughed, but there was always this subtle tension. Like she was aware I was starting to notice things, even if I hadn't said anything. Small arguments became more frequent. Nothing explosive, just little jabs and defensiveness. "You're acting weird. Are you hiding something?" I joke, but even that made her tense, and I hated that. I hated feeling like I was breaking the trust between us, but at the same time, I couldn't ignore it. I started cross-referencing the information I had found. Old friends' comments, social media posts, documents, emails. Little contradictions started to surface. One post from a former teacher called her Jessica Elaine, while a family friend's comment referred to her as Marie. Some files reference a scholarship she supposedly applied for as Jessica Elaine. Others mentioned Jessica Marie. And I kept asking myself, why? Why would she hide this? It was like every little piece of her life was coded, a puzzle I wasn't meant to solve, and yet I couldn't stop. One night, exhausted and frustrated, I confronted her gently. "Babe, can we talk about your middle name?" She froze. I knew right then, from the way she stiffened and avoided my gaze, that this wasn't just about a name. There was history, trauma, something she had buried deep enough that even mentioning it made her uncomfortable. She gave me a vague answer. "It's complicated. I'll tell you someday." Someday. That word cut deeper than any outright lie. She knew I was onto something, and she wasn't ready or willing to tell me yet. I went back to the files. That's when I noticed a small folder labeled Alternate Life. Alternate Life. I almost dropped the laptop. I clicked. Inside were old journals, letters, and photos, all under the name Jessica Elaine. Not Marie. Not the Jessica I married. Someone else. Someone she had been before. Someone she had deliberately left behind. I sat there, staring at the screen, trying to piece it together. Who was she really? Why hide this? And what part of this other life might still touch our lives now? That night, I lay awake beside her, pretending to sleep, watching her breathe peacefully. Unaware of the storm I had uncovered, I realized something terrifying. I didn't just not know her middle name. I didn't know her at all. And the deeper I dug, the more shadows I found. And I had no idea what would crawl out of them next. But one thing was clear. There was no turning back. I had found her secret, and I was going to follow it wherever it led. And whatever I discovered next, it was going to change everything. I always thought I knew her. Turns out I only knew the version she wanted me to see. After days of lurking through old emails, social media posts, and a folder labeled Alternate Life, the tension in our house had become unbearable. It wasn't just curiosity anymore. It was an obsession, a gnawing need to understand the truth, to figure out why the woman I married had lied about something as simple and as personal as her middle name. I decided it was time, not for more subtle investigations, not for more unanswered questions. Time for confrontation. It started over breakfast, the kind of quiet morning where sunlight warms the kitchen and you almost forget the chaos brewing underneath. I sat across from her, my coffee cold, heart pounding like a bass drum in a dark club. "Jessica," I began carefully, "I found some stuff about your middle name." She froze mid-bite, eyes widening. For the first time in years, I saw her vulnerability, the shadow behind the confident smile she usually wore like armor. "I thought maybe we should talk," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, though inside I felt like I was about to explode. She set down her fork, took a deep breath, and for a long, tense moment, didn't speak. Then she whispered, almost to herself, "I suppose this day had to come." I leaned forward. "Please, I need to understand." And then she told me. Not everything at once, but enough to make my head spin. Her real middle name was Elaine, yes. And yes, she had changed it to Marie, but not just for preference or vanity. She changed it to escape. Escape from a past that had been heavy, dangerous, and painful. Her childhood wasn't what I thought it was. Her parents weren't cruel in the obvious ways, but there was chaos, neglect, and shadows that lingered long after the house lights went out. Arguments that turned violent, secrets whispered in corridors that no child should hear, threats that never fully made sense until years later. And then there was her brother, or rather, the memory of him. A strange, unpredictable, the kind of sibling who could make your life a living nightmare without even trying. She had left town at 16, cutting all ties, desperate for a fresh start. But she couldn't just erase her existence. Her name, her birth certificate, even the casual mention of Jessica Elaine could have tied her back to that life. So she chose Marie, a middle name she picked herself, one that sounded neutral, safe, and separate. She wore it like a shield, and for years it worked. I felt my chest tighten. Betrayal, of course, but also sympathy, fear. admiration. The woman in front of me had endured more than I could imagine, and she had built a life where she could feel safe, even if it meant keeping secrets from me, the person she supposedly trusted most. You never told me, I said, voice thick. Not once, not even a hint. She looked down, fingers fidgeting with the edge of the table. I know. I wanted to. So many times I thought I could tell you, but every time I tried, I froze. I was scared. Not of you, of losing you. Yes, but also of the consequences. My past, it's messy. Dangerous in ways you can't imagine. I wanted to interrupt, to shout, to demand every detail, but I didn't. I let her speak, pouring out years of pain, each sentence heavier than the last. She told me about the nights she stayed awake, fearing calls or letters that might reveal her secrets, about friends she had to cut off, about mistakes she'd made in her desperation to protect herself, about the guilt of lying, not because she wanted to hurt anyone, but because it was the only way she could survive. I felt tears prick my eyes, rage, hurt, love, and compassion, all at once. My hands shook. How could someone carry so much, yet still make you feel like the most important person in their world? I debated morality in my head. Was hiding this justified? She had kept a secret from me, yes, but it was a protective secret, a survival mechanism. And yet, as her husband, I couldn't help but feel deceived. Trust is supposed to be everything. Lies, even small ones, shake foundations. I asked the questions that had been circling my mind. Why didn't you tell me when we met? Why didn't you change it legally? She looked at me with eyes full of pain. Because at that time, I didn't trust anyone, not even myself. I was still learning how to live outside that life. And the day I finally felt safe enough to love, to be vulnerable, I wanted to give you the version of me that I could offer without dragging you into my past. I sat back, trying to process it all. She had been living two lives in parallel, the one she had survived and the one she wanted to share. And now, with her laying it bare, the weight of her secret pressed down on both of us. We argued, yes. We argued about timing, about honesty, about whether a relationship could survive secrets this deep. But between the anger and frustration, there was also understanding. She wasn't a liar in the malicious sense. She was a survivor, and loving her meant reconciling with both her truths, the one she had shared and the one she had hidden. That night, after hours of talking, tears, and silence, we started to rebuild, slowly, piece by piece. I could feel the cracks in our relationship begin to fill with empathy and patience. We laughed a little, we cried a little, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were finally on the same page. But Life has a way of reminding you that even when you think you understand someone, the shadows don't disappear. As I was tidying up the laptop, making a mental note to stop digging for a while, I noticed a new file, one I hadn't seen before. Its name was simple, innocuous, pending explanation. My stomach sank. I didn't open it immediately. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, realizing that no matter how much she had shared, no matter how much I had forgiven or tried to understand, there was more. Something she hadn't told me yet. Something still buried in the past, waiting to resurface. And just like that, the fragile calm we had built began to tremble. I realized then that even though she had shared her secret, even though we had begun to mend, the story wasn't over. The shadows she had escaped from weren't done with her. And maybe, just maybe, our lives were about to collide with the part of her past she hadn't been ready to show anyone, not even me. I didn't know what was in that file. I didn't know if I wanted to know. But one thing was certain, my journey into her past had only just begun. And the next chapter of our lives promised to be far darker, far more complicated, and far more revealing than I could have ever imagined. And deep down, I knew I would open that file. Because once curiosity gets a hold of you, there's no turning back. It wasn't just her middle name, it was everything I thought I knew about her. After she confessed, after the tears, the quiet admissions, and the fragile patching of trust, I thought I could finally breathe. I thought maybe we could move forward. But the thing about secrets is that they don't vanish just because someone confesses. They linger, they fester, and sometimes they're far bigger than you ever imagined. I started digging again, not recklessly this time, not like before, when curiosity was my only guide, but cautiously, carefully, like walking on thin ice. I went through old legal records, obscure small-town newspapers, social media threads I hadn't checked before. I called people I barely knew, just casual enough to avoid suspicion. And what I found, it shook me. Friends from her hometown, some she hadn't mentioned in years, had conflicting stories. Some swore her middle name was Marie, others, Elaine. A few hinted at incidents that she had never shared. One casual conversation about a high school summer job led to a cryptic warning from an old coworker. She's not who she lets people see. Some things you don't ask, and some things you don't tell. I didn't know whether to feel protective, suspicious, or afraid. At home, the tension grew. She sensed it, even when I tried to hide it. The tiny defensiveness I noticed in earlier chapters now became a subtle, constant undercurrent. A glance too long, a pause when I asked seemingly innocuous questions, a small sigh that she thought I wouldn't notice. One evening, I finally confronted her again. Jessica, are you hiding anything else? Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't lie. Not exactly. She just stayed silent, and that silence was louder than any confession. I wanted to yell, I wanted to accuse, I wanted to storm out, but I also wanted to understand. I loved her, I still do. But I realized that love alone couldn't erase the nagging question: had I married the woman I thought I knew, or someone else entirely? I went back to her old emails and files. That folder, pending explanation, still stared at me, innocuous but loaded with promise and threat. And inside, I found something that made my stomach drop. A scanned legal document dated years before we met linked her to a financial trust in a name I didn't recognize at first: Jessica Elaine, last name. That trust wasn't just any trust, it had connections, assets, and implications that could affect anyone tied to her. Anyone, including me. My mind raced. Could this be why she changed her middle name? Not just to escape a chaotic childhood, but to sever legal ties, financial ties, maybe even criminal or dangerous connections. Was her past coming back in ways I couldn't predict? I started reaching out again. Old friends, distant relatives, people she had trusted long before me. I kept the questions casual, lighthearted, almost joking. Hey, do you remember Jessica? Middle name Marie or Elaine? But every answer seemed to deepen the uncertainty. Some people avoided the topic entirely. Others gave vague, contradictory responses. And one even warned me, be careful with what you're digging up. Some things aren't safe to know. That phrase haunted me. Back home, the tension boiled over. She noticed my preoccupation. The late nights, the constant scrolling, the questions. You're acting like a detective, she said one night, her voice tired and strained. You're going to drive yourself crazy, you know. I have to understand it, Jessica, I said, my voice low, almost a whisper, because I can't marry someone I don't fully know. Her eyes softened, but there was fear there too. Fear I hadn't anticipated. I didn't hide things to hurt you, she said. I hid them to survive. Some things, some people, you don't understand until you've lived them. And that was the thing. I didn't understand. I couldn't, but I needed to. And as I dug deeper, I realized the implications were bigger than I had feared. A small-town newspaper clipping buried in an archive mentioned her, Jessica Elaine, being involved in an incident that made headlines. Not criminal per se, but messy, controversial, and enough to tarnish reputations if linked back to her real name. The article was old, but the consequences could still ripple through her life. And because she had married me under the name Jessica Marie, there was potential exposure. Financial exposure, legal exposure, social exposure. I felt the walls close in. I loved her. I trusted her. But if the truth came out fully, it could ruin everything we had built together. She tried to talk, tried to explain. Every time I pressed, she became evasive but emotional. Tears, quiet admissions, half-truths that made me both sympathetic and furious. I didn't know whether to reach for her hand or to pull away entirely. Love and suspicion warred inside me. I felt trapped between loyalty and the need for truth. And then came the foreshadowing that froze me in place. She mentioned, almost casually, a past relationship that she had erased from her life. Someone dangerous, she said. Someone who could have jeopardized her life if she had stayed connected. And then, cryptically, some things are better left buried, for both our sakes. The words echoed in my head, for both our sakes. I realized then that this wasn't just about her middle name. It wasn't just about childhood trauma or a quirky preference. This was a living, breathing past that could intrude into our present, and if she wasn't careful, it could put both of us in real danger. I spent the next several nights sleepless, piecing together what I knew. Scanning emails, rereading documents, connecting dots like a detective obsessed with a case he couldn't close. Every small fact pointed to a bigger story. A story she hadn't fully shared. A story that, if revealed, might upend our lives entirely. And then, just when I thought I was starting to understand, evidence surfaced that made my blood run cold. A legal notice, tucked away in an old folder, linked her former identity to assets and liabilities, debts, obligations, potential lawsuits. If anyone discovered her connection to these under the wrong name, both our lives could be at risk. Financially, legally, socially. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The lie wasn't small. It wasn't harmless. It was a network of shadows stretching across years, tying her past to her present, threatening to pull me, willingly or not, into a storm I didn't understand yet. I confronted her again, softly this time, because yelling wouldn't fix anything. Jessica, this isn't just a name anymore. It's bigger, way bigger than me, than us, and I don't know if I'm ready for it. She took a deep breath, eyes brimming with tears. I know. I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you everything. I really did. But some things you can't just explain. You lived through them. And I didn't want to drag you into a life you didn't choose. I nodded, feeling the weight of her words pressing into my chest. And yet, even as I tried to step back and understand, a small voice in my head whispered, there's more. There's always more. And I was right, because buried in one of the final documents I found, something she hadn't mentioned even in the half confession of the chapter 3, was a letter, unsigned but clearly official. It referenced her old identity, potential legal entanglements, and a warning that disclosure under the wrong circumstances could have consequences, not just for her, but for anyone associated with her. My heart sank. The shadows of her past weren't done with her. They weren't done with us. And the deeper I went, the more I realized this lie was bigger than me, bigger than our marriage, bigger than anything I had anticipated when I first stumbled upon her middle name. And somehow, I knew we weren't going to be able to simply move forward. Not until the full truth came out. And maybe, just maybe, that truth would change everything. I thought I wanted the truth, but I wasn't ready for what it cost. After weeks of digging, questioning, and lying awake at night staring at her side of the bed, I finally reached the point where I couldn't avoid it anymore. The folder labeled pending explanation, the emails, the old documents, the cryptic hints in her past, it was all screaming at me. It's time to know everything. I remember sitting across from her in the living room, the evening sun painting long shadows on the walls. My hands shook slightly as I opened the laptop. She sat quietly beside me, eyes fixed on the floor as if bracing herself. "Show me," I said, voice barely more than a whisper. She exhaled, a slow tremor running through her. "I should have told you from the start," she said, voice thick with emotion, "but I didn't. I was afraid of losing you, of dragging you into something that wasn't your life." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I had to know. And then she told me. Her middle name, Elaine, wasn't just a small personal preference or a childhood quirk. It was the key to a life she had deliberately abandoned, a life that could have ended her freedom and possibly mine if it had followed us. Jessica had been part of witness protection, not the TV movie version, with fake identities and secret agents knocking on doors, but real, legal, and carefully managed. Years ago, her family had been involved in something dangerous, criminal connections she refused to specify, people who weren't afraid to hurt anyone who threatened exposure. She had seen what they could do, what they had done, and at 16, she'd made the hardest choice a teenager could make, leave everything behind, change her identity, and start over completely as Jessica Murray. It wasn't just a name. It was survival. I felt my stomach twist. Betrayal, of course. I had married a woman who had hidden an enormous truth from me. But alongside it, there was awe, fear, and an overwhelming desire to protect her. She had endured more in her life than anyone should. She had built a world of safety, and I had nearly destroyed that with my curiosity. I tried to speak, but the words tangled in my throat. "Why now?" I finally asked. "Why tell me all of this?" "Because you deserve to know," she said softly. "And because the past, it's catching up. Not to hurt us, but it's unavoidable. I wanted to shield you as long as I could. I still do, but I can't anymore. You're part of my life now, and nothing I hide can protect you unless we face it together." Her honesty, raw and unflinching, made me cry. Not just from fear or frustration, but from the weight of what she had carried alone. All those years of pretending, all those nights of uncertainty, all the sacrifices she had made just to survive. She had done it without asking for praise, without seeking recognition, just because she had to. We sat in silence for a while, the gravity of her confession settling over us. I didn't know whether to hug her, to cry, or to scream. All I could do was hold her hand and let the tears flow. Then the reality hit me. The consequences weren't just emotional. Her hidden past, while carefully buried, had legal and financial implications. The documents I'd stumbled across indicated potential liabilities, assets, and connections that could unravel if exposed. Witness protection isn't just a name change, it's a legal structure, a delicate balance between secrecy and accountability. And here we were, living an ordinary life, completely oblivious to the tightrope she had been walking for years. We talked for hours, every detail she could safely reveal, every moment she could explain without compromising her current life, she shared. She told me about the estranged family she left behind, about friends she couldn't reach, about dangers she had narrowly escaped. I asked questions, gently, cautiously, because I knew some unanswers could hurt more than silence. And through it all, the emotional roller coaster was brutal. Anger, relief, fear, love, betrayal, forgiveness. Every minute brought a new wave of conflicting emotions, leaving me raw and exposed. I realized that marriage wasn't just about shared joys, it was about facing the shadows together, even when they terrify you. There were moments when I doubted whether I could forgive her. Not because I stopped loving her, but because the enormity of her secret made me question the foundation of our trust. Could we rebuild it? Could we survive a revelation that touched every corner of her life, and by extension, ours? But then I looked at her, vulnerable and exhausted, and I saw someone I had always loved, someone brave, resilient, and scarred, but still my partner. And in that moment, I knew forgiveness wasn't a choice, it was a necessity, not just for her, but for both of us. We confronted the consequences together. We reviewed the documents, the legal obligations, the potential risks. We contacted lawyers, sought advice, and made plans to protect ourselves. Every step was terrifying, but we faced it together, shoulder to shoulder. It wasn't easy, it wasn't clean, and it certainly wasn't over. But in facing it, something shifted. The fragile cracks between us began to mend. Trust wasn't instantaneous, it never is. But it started to grow, thread by thread. Every shared secret, every difficult conversation, Every tear and apology became a bridge over the canyon that had formed between us. By the end of that week, after countless discussions, planning, and emotional reckonings, I finally understood the full weight of what her middle name had meant. Marie was never just a lie. It was a lifeline, a shield, a chance at a life she could control. And now, by revealing her past to me, she had extended that trust further than anyone had any right to expect. I sat back one evening, looking at her across the kitchen table, and reflected on everything that had happened. The middle name, it seemed so small, so insignificant, yet it had been the key to understanding her entire life. A single word, hiding decades of fear, courage, survival, and sacrifice. And I realized something important. Curiosity may lead you to the truth, but the truth comes at a cost. Sometimes it exposes more than you're ready to face. Sometimes it demands empathy, patience, and a willingness to rebuild everything you thought you knew. I loved her. I still love her. And now, more than ever, I respect the life she had built, the choices she had made, and the courage it took to finally share her truth with me. The middle name wasn't just a detail. It was a doorway, and through it I learned more about love, trust, and resilience than I ever could have imagined. We didn't have all the answers, we didn't have all the clarity, but we had each other, and sometimes that's enough. Because a middle name may seem trivial, but the story behind it can change everything. All right, that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the story. We have so many more amazing stories coming your way, so make sure you hit that subscribe button. Our goal is to reach 100K subscribers by the end of this year, and we'd love for you to be part of this journey. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.